All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Legacy and Libations, where we talk about life, death, and the beverages that get us through it. My name is Bill Soroka. I'm the author of Sign and Thrive, How to Make Six Figures as a Mobile Notary and Loan Signing Agent, as well as a newly released book, Beyond Loan Signings. I'm here with my incredible co-host, also a best-selling author, John Braddock. John, thank you so much. How are you?
I'm doing great, my friend. It's great to see you all again. I'm John Braddock, Bill's co-host and author of the bestseller, Click Here When I Die, making things easier for those we love. Because after all, isn't that what we should be doing?
Nice. I love it. Oh, never fails. Got a little.
I think we just lost you, Bill.
I got one of those vacuums that vacuums the house by itself.
A Roomba?
A Roomba, yeah. I thought it was the most ridiculous purchase ever. I was so resistant to it, but it has absolutely changed my life. But we named her Blanche, and she likes to work during webinars. So sorry for the intrusion there. John, I'm really looking forward. I mean, we've been dark for 2 weeks for travel and other reasons, and I'm so excited for this. I've been looking forward to hearing the story of our special guest today, especially when you teased it out with me a couple months ago. And just hearing his story, I really been looking forward to this. So you're in for a real treat if you're here. Guys, this is being recorded. You can absolutely watch the replay. I'm going to turn it over to John so he can introduce our very special guest today.
Great. Well, thank you. Yeah, I'm excited too. I was trying to have Shane actually on with us much sooner, but because of schedules and things, we had to push it out till today. But let me introduce Shane Phillips, who's in the greater Denver, Colorado area, Castle Rock to be exact. He too is an author. He's the author of the book, First Steps, a comprehensive guide to financial matters after a death. In addition to that, he's the founder and creator of what I think is the most amazing online course I've ever seen. It's called First Steps Help. And it's an online grief course that's designed to help those who are struggling to figure out what to do with all the financial matters of a deceased loved one. When I first read his book, which was about a year ago, I thought, wow, if I had only known what was in this book, it would have made my job so much easier when my father-in-law died. Real brief background on Shane. Correct me when I'm wrong, my friend. He's got over 27 years of experience in banking and financial services, 2 decades of community service in the grief care area. He offers a really unique perspective on financial issues and death, and you're going to learn his why in just a few minutes. Oh yeah, you might want to go ahead and grab a tissue before he does that. But in 2004, Shane co-founded the Children's Grief Education Association, and for 6 years has been with them providing grief counseling to over 400 Denver area children. They merged into Heartlight in 2011, where Shane has served as the chairman of the board of directors of the Heartlight Center. Shane and his lovely wife, Valerie, live in Castle Rock with their 5 children who range in age from 12 to 21. I think I have the numbers right. Welcome, Shane.
Right.
Glad to have you with us, my friend.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here and so glad to be a part of this conversation this evening. And I will tease out that at the end of my comments for all of the mobile notaries on the call, which I think there's a lot. I learned something new from the bank that I work with today about why we have to have real signatures. And I'll tell you about that at the very end of the call and how you might be able to use that to grow your business in whatever market that you're in. John, Bill, do you want me to just kind of get into my story, or what would you like?
Well, I'll tell you, Shane, let's do this. So everyone has a little quick background. Shane, you and I think we first met about a year ago through a
Correct.
mutual friend who's an estate planning attorney up in Denver. And
Right.
she is familiar with both of us and both of our missions and the path that we are on. And she thought, man, these two guys might really have some synergies. And then you shared your story with me, which made it immediately crystal clear why you do what you do. So yeah, if you would please share your story with our audience, and let's go, back in time. Let's go to your childhood and your family life and intrigue us.
Yeah.
Okay. So I wish I had a time machine. I'll do this. This is the
Yeah.
time machine.
That sets the scene. Perfect.
Yeah. Like Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, right? Well, so in all seriousness, so I was born in Colorado. We moved to Washington, D.C. in 1982 when I was 9. My dad had an opportunity to work in D.C. and that opportunity sprung into a business, and his passion was flying. And so in '86, he purchased a share in a partnership in an aircraft. And all along the way, he and my mom were building their small computer consulting business. And one of the other things that was really important to my parents was that my sister and I both have an opportunity to live and learn overseas. And so he had built a friendship with the German military attaché to the United States, who was based in DC. And his name was Colonel Klaus Sieber. He had a friend in Germany that had a daughter my age that also wanted to come to another country to learn. And so we set up a private exchange, and I was somewhat reluctant. I was a freshman in high school when my parents informed me that I was going to take German and go to Germany in a year. And so, being the dutiful soldier, my dad had been a Marine, and I followed orders. And the summer of 1989, I left Washington, D.C. for a little town in Germany. And when I got there, my host family was there, and Nicole, who was going to be taking my place in the US while I was in Germany, she and her mom and dad and sister took me on this incredible trip around Europe. They had a boat that they kept in France that they liked to sail to the island of Corsica. And so we drove down through Europe, and myself, the mom, Helga, Nicole, we did that drive. And then Klaus and Christina sailed the boat from Nice to Corsica. And so I was living a dream, right? Here I am on this sailboat. I'm with this host family. I'm seeing Europe, and all the reservations I had about not being in the U.S. For my junior year of high school quickly went out the door. And so we were sailing, and every time we would get to a new port, we had to register our boat with our passports, who was on board, etc. And so we got to a port in Corsica called Ajaccio, and registered. And the next morning, some French police came to our boat, and they were asking for Jean-Philippe. And the Vorings didn't speak French. I didn't speak French. They didn't speak English. And so we're going around and around with these police officers to try to figure out what's going on. And somebody says, Jean-Philippe, call home. And so my dad had given me an AT&T calling card, a 16-digit number that I could use to call from anywhere in the world. And so I called home, and I first called my house, and nobody answered. And it was 3 or 4 in the morning, Washington, D.C. time. And then I tried my parents' office, and we had mobile phones in our cars at that time, and I couldn't get a hold of anybody. And so I called my best friend, um, and his mom answered, and again early in the morning, and she said, you need to get a hold of somebody in your family, but I can't tell you why. So here I am, halfway across the world, in a on a payphone in a French police station, and I finally get a hold of my grandmother here in Denver, and she says, "You don't know?" And I said, "I don't know what." And she said, "Your mommy and daddy were killed in a plane crash." And so that plane that my dad had bought into 3 years earlier, he was piloting. They were returning from New Jersey back to Washington, D.C., and they encountered a pretty bad storm. And he and my mom and sister and my sister's best friend, who was sitting in my seat, they were all killed. And so I went from, the topless beaches of France with this host family, to really being at rock bottom. I mean, you're, 16 years old. How do I get home? What do I do? What happens? And so thankfully, my host family, they got me home. Klaus, my host father, uh, went with me all the way from Corsica to Paris to Frankfurt to DC, and then all the way to Denver for their funerals. And what I remember, and I see some folks that are probably my age or close to my age, was that back in the late '80s, you could still smoke on airplanes, and Klaus liked unfiltered clove cigarettes, and he chain smoked those all the way from Corsica to Denver. And so that was kind of my enduring impression of that. But I was so fortunate that they came back and brought me back here. And so when the dust settled, when my parents and sister were buried, their questions came up about where was I going to live? What was I going to do? What would happen with my parents' business? And I mentioned my dad had been a Marine in Vietnam. He had been wounded there, survived. He was 39. My mom was 40 when they died. They had not done any estate planning. They had not done the things that My Life and Wishes helps families with, John's solution. And so basically, I became a ward of the state of Virginia at 16 years old. I had a business, I had real estate, I had a lot of debt, I had no life insurance. I was grieving, and I had to figure out, like, what do I do? How do I get through this? And so by the grace of God and some great people in my community, I started to figure those things out, but it wasn't without some definite challenges. I lived with one family to begin with, which I thought was a good match. It did not turn out to be a good match. And so any of you that have children, particularly teenagers or young adults, we all know that they're way smarter than us. And so in my infinite wisdom at 16, I thought, well, I'll just go back to my house and I'll live in my house. And I didn't think about the fact that, there was a mortgage and there were utilities, and, the fridge was always stocked because my mom went to the grocery store twice a week. And so me and my dog lived in my house for a couple of nights and figured out that wouldn't probably work out long term. And I walked 2 doors down. The place we lived was a little bit rural, and so people had land, and it was a family that I had watched their animals, their horses and dogs, when they had been on vacation, but I didn't know them really well. But it was the only light I saw in the neighborhood that night. And I knocked on their door at about 9 o'clock at night, and I said, "Hey, would you mind if I just slept on your couch tonight?" And they said, "Well, we've been praying that you'd come over here." And so began my journey of living with the Beesons. And again, by the grace of God, Phil was a corporate attorney and also a CPA, and his wife at the time, Jory, was a child advocate for the county in which we lived. And so I was very, very fortunate to have kind of a new family that welcomed me with open arms. They had a 1-year-old child, but you know, 2 people that really knew the legal system, and they were able to help me with the business, with my emancipation as a minor, and then really just kind of giving me some structure for my last 2 years of high school. And so I finished high school in Virginia, and I reflect on this as my middle son graduates from high school tomorrow, and we have a huge graduation party for him on Saturday. The day after I graduated, I loaded a U-Haul and I moved back to Denver, and that was my graduation party. Was coming back to be near my grandparents and aunts and uncles and cousins. And so I went to the University of Denver, worked my way through there, and I started in banking and finance in 1995 when I got out of college. In 2003, and John kind of alluded to it, I kind of had this epiphany. I read the book, The Purpose-Driven Life, which is the first chapter of that, and it's by Rick Warren, if anybody wants to read that. Phenomenal book. But the first chapter talks about how your life is not about you, it's about the legacy that you leave. And so as I kind of read through that and thought about, why did these things happen to me? And what is my legacy going to be? I realized that, one of the things I didn't really get back in 1989, because it wasn't a part of our culture like it is today, was grief counseling. And so I endeavored to build a nonprofit to provide free grief counseling to any kid in Denver that needed it, and figured out a model in which we could provide that for free using graduate students from area universities, and operated that for about 6 years. And then as my family grew and my career grew, it was bigger than I could handle. And so sadly, we had another death in our family, and one of my cousin's sons, and it was kind of left to me to make the arrangements. I went into Haran McConaty Funeral Home, made the arrangements, and I noticed that they had a nonprofit called the Heartlight Center. And the Heartlight Center was designed to serve primarily widows and widowers. The families that they would serve through the funeral home, they would provide grief counseling to them. And so I called John Haran and I said, hey, I've got a children's grief care program. You've got an adult one. Why don't we merge the two? I don't have the capacity to continue to run mine on its own. And he said, yes, we can merge them, but I'm ready to step down as the board chair. So if you'll become the board chair, then we'll take you guys in. And so that really set me on the path for what has become First Steps. And so as a part of my role at Heartlight, I needed to attend the various different grief care groups, loss of a spouse, loss of an adult child, etc. And one of the common refrains that I would hear is, well, my wife handled our finances. I don't even know how to log into our bank account. Or my husband handled all the investments, and I don't even know where to start. Or my 25-year-old child was killed in a car accident, and I don't have access to any of her bank accounts, investment accounts. I have no rights. And so I thought, well, as a service to the greater community within Heartlight, I'm going to find a resource to help these families. And so I started doing a search, and I found, there's 1,001 books on grief and 1,001 books on, estate planning. But there was nothing out there that said, okay, somebody just died today. What do you do? How do you plan and pay for a funeral? What documents are you going to have to collect over the next couple of months? What roadblocks are you going to run into? These were all things that I had experienced, 20 years before. But it didn't all come together until I saw it more in an adult setting. And so I spent a year of Saturdays at our local library. And I sometimes had my banker hat on, and other times I would call, an attorney or a CPA that I did work with, and I would get the information. But after a year of Saturdays, I was able to write First Steps. And so that was in 2013. And then going forward, I never had a big vision other than I wanted to help people. And so I would go and speak at churches or at, the local Rotary Club, and, people would buy my book. I've given away more than I've sold, because it's never been about making money. It's been about serving people that have suffered through what I have suffered through. And
Hey, Shane.
about a year and a half. Yeah.
Yeah. Let me let you take a breath for a minute and let us all
Okay.
soak this in. And I want you to keep going, because this is, I mean, I know your story and I love it. First of all, I think many in our audience probably feel the same way I do, that, wow, what a story. And, holy cow, I can't even imagine. And then what you went through to go through that process and stay strong. And I got some other questions about your own mental health and things following that, right?
Yeah.
But to take that experience and like you say, do something with it, and what's going to be your legacy. I had a good friend who's no longer living, and he was severely handicapped through life. But he always had this motto, and he always had a smile on his face. He always said, "This isn't happening to me, it's happening for me." And if we think about all the things that occur in our lives, we're always like, well, why is this happening to me? All bad things happen to me. It's like to take the realization is, why is it happening to me? And say it's happening for me. And clearly in your case, that is the path that you've gone on. And I can think of no one better to, there's all kinds of counselors and therapists that can talk to children about grief and dealing with sadness, but they haven't lived through it like you have. And so, kudos to you for, rising above a horrific experience in your life. And, having your family, doing what you do, and in your spare time, helping children deal with it, getting the right people in place, and then, this valuable resource in your book and your course. But I'll let you go on and continue to talk about the book and putting it together. But it's an amazing
Well,
story.
thank you for that, John. Just to kind of reflect on what you said, I credit two things in my life really for what set the tone after I lost my family. One was a conversation I had with my father, I don't know, maybe 2 years before he passed away. And it was, I won't get into all the details, but it basically, the crux of the conversation was, if you had 10 minutes to live, what would you do?
Shane, I think you froze up on us, my friend. We'll give him a second and see if he unfreezes. Because I don't know about the rest of you guys, but I want to know what he'd do if he only had 10 minutes.
I know. What a cliffhanger.
Yeah. And then we're all going to need to.
Well played, Shane. Well played, Shane. You have our attention. He's probably
like we can schedule technical difficulties.
Right. Hey, maybe he can't.
Right.
He looks like an iPhone user. Those guys can do anything.
Should be able to. I think he jumped out. He's probably going to log
Yeah, he's
back
gonna pop
in.
back in. Yeah.
But I mean, that, you want to talk about a little bit of theatrics there. If you only had 10 minutes, what would you do?
And interesting to discuss it with a 14-year-old,
Right.
Right.
Exactly. And
know-
now it's got me thinking,
Well, it's interesting.
know?
What's really striking me with this conversation right now, and we can talk about this when it gets back in too, is even in the midst of something like this, all the synchronicity that came together to help him get through it. Like just the fact that the neighbor was a CPA who could help him navigate this, and the wife is a child advocate. I mean, it's just pretty amazing.
Right. Yeah, to have those resources available to you, and the kindness, of people, because especially I grew up in New Jersey, and so I know the East Coast. And with all due respect to anyone else on the East Coast, that sometimes people just stay in their own little shell and don't want to talk to people. And we knew a couple of our neighbors, but we certainly didn't know a lot of them. And I don't know who would have stepped up had I been in a situation like that. But thank God there are people out there who are like that and will do that and come to the aid of even a 16-year-old, because was that the same 16-year-old who was TPing my house last Halloween?
Oh, here he comes. Shane, welcome back. Just kidding, he's not in yet. Oh, there he is.
Hey,
I don't know what happened there.
That was the best moment you could have ever done. Do you know when you froze up?
When?
You said, so you're having a conversation with your dad about a couple years previous, and he said to me, if you only had 10 minutes to live, what would you do?
And that's when you we're on the edge of our seats here.
And so we've been having some side chatter here. We're all trying to figure out what we do, but please continue.
Sure. So I wish I could say that I planned that, but I didn't. So he said I would tell you everything that I know about life, and then I would tell you that I love you. And so that really stuck with me. And I was looking to see on my shelf here. I do have it. Hold on. When I flew back from Germany, I wrote, this is the travel journal that my mom gave me to take notes on while I was in Europe. And I wrote this, but then my aunt typed this letter out. And it was the letter I wrote to my parents. And I wrote it, I think August 1st, they died July 31st. And it was kind of a promise to them that I would never let their deaths and their loss be an excuse for not succeeding in some capacity in life. And so I think those two things stuck with me and kind of continued to be drivers, as I built my career and through nonprofits and growing my family, that, I felt it was somewhat preordained that I had an obligation to our community to do something. And so that's really been kind of my why, over the last, it'll be 34 years this July. So I think I kind of left off with about a year and a half ago, a friend of mine said, hey, your book is great, but, it's kind of old school. Today, people, are learning online, they're disseminating information online, et cetera. And so with that encouragement, I spent another year of Saturdays at the library and converted the entire book into the online course that anybody can download and take. It's the same price as the book. You also get a PDF copy of the book, as well as all of the exhibits and worksheets that will help a family when they're going through this type of challenge.
And so that's, my job as leading a commercial bank here in Denver is how I provide for my brood of 5 kids. But my passion is really helping anybody. And, if we had all night, I could tell you some incredible stories. Actually, I'm going to tell you guys one story because it just kind of reveals how important this is. My youngest son, his godmother is a doctor, and she had a nurse in her practice who one Sunday morning they got home from church. Her husband went upstairs to change and collapsed of a heart attack in his closet as he was changing. And so I got this panic call that this had happened and they needed help. And so I went over there that night. And this was a classic case, and it doesn't matter if it's the husband or the wife, but it was a classic case of one person kind of handled everything. They didn't have a My Life and Wishes where the passwords were in there, the logins were in there, the will, the trust, the powers of attorney. They didn't have anything. And so I sat down with the wife and I brought one of my colleagues, a female financial planner, just because I felt like that was the right thing to do. And she said, I don't even know where to start. I don't know if we have life insurance. I don't know anything. And they were also a very disorganized family, which meant that there were bank statements in the pantry along with the Cheetos. And there were shoe boxes under the bed. And so my colleague Tammy and I really started a treasure hunt of just gathering up all of this stuff. And the first concern was that she didn't know even like what their monthly budget was. She didn't know what their income was between their 2 jobs, what they spent at the grocery store, et cetera. And so Tammy and I set out and we got 12 months of their bank statements. And we went through line by line and we looked at, okay, what are they spending at King Soopers, which is our Kroger here? What are they spending on Netflix? What are they spending on fast food, et cetera, et cetera? And we came across one line item for $42 a month. It was an ACH transfer. And, if you've seen those on your bank statement, you might like, my wife will text me and say, what is this for? And then I research it and figure out what it is. It was an ACH transfer to a life insurance company. And so we were able to trace that through the bank and contacted the life insurance company, and come to find out he had $1.5 million of life insurance, which his wife didn't even know about. And so that took that conversation from, I'm going to have to sell my house, how am I going to get my kids through college, how do I buy groceries next week, to within about 4 weeks, she had that $1.5 million in her bank account. And those are some of the things I go through in First Steps. Like, I would venture to guess that some or a portion of the folks on the call have life insurance in some capacity, whether it's through an employer or you bought it individually. But very few of us have ever had to make a claim. And that claims process is a challenging process. And in fact, that's, put a little note, everybody that's a notary, most of those claims have to be notarized. So that's a way that you can create value in a market that has nothing to do with real estate, right? Networking with insurance agents or financial planners that may carry that life insurance policy. There's work for you right there. And that is not dependent on the economy or interest rates or anything else. But so in First Steps, I kind of detail a lot of these little things that, whether you're 16 years old when something like this happens, or you're 70 and your spouse passes away and it's the first time you have to deal with these things. There's never been a roadmap until First Steps came out for how do you make a life insurance claim? What do you do with Social Security? How do you get that whopping $255 death benefit that hasn't changed in 40 years? it's still a benefit. You still need to get it. Down to the more painful things, like if it was your spouse that passed away and you filed taxes jointly, you're going to have to file one more tax return together, and they're not going to be there with you. And so,
you know what we've experienced too, Shane, let me add to that. I mean, because what you say is so impactful. You know, as you hear me say this all the time, ad nauseum, some secrets should not be taken to the grave.
that's right.
And it is all too common that one person in the family handles the financial stuff. Michelle, in my case, handles it all. I mean, God forbid, previous to our My Life and Wishes platform, and now I know what's due, when it's due, and everything else. Prior to that, I'd have bill collectors lined up at the front door if something happened to her. They'd be saying, "You owe us money." I'm like, "I'm happy to pay you. I just didn't know." Right?
Yeah.
And the life insurance thing is huge, because over $1 billion life insurance has gone unclaimed simply because people didn't know that mom or dad had the policy in the first place. And, you know, lastly, I can tell you from personal experience, when the spouse dies and you're on this, you refer to it as a treasure hunt, I refer to it as a morbid scavenger hunt. That person really doesn't give a shit. They've just lost their best friend, the person they've been with for 20 years, 50 years, 60 years.
Yeah.
And, you know, they need other people to help do this stuff. And like I say, what you did with Tracy, I think you said her name was Tracy, to help this person, you know, is a blessing. And your course, like I say, had I had that 10 years ago, prior to my father-in-law dying, it would have made our scavenger hunt so much easier, because there was stuff, and I was in the financial services world. There's stuff in there that I didn't even think of. So I think your course and book are a must-have for people, which is why you and I are having a conversation of seeing how we can fit it into the legacy vault. Because if I die, the first thing I want my family to do is have access to that course. It's like, do this. It's going to make sorting through the rest of the stuff really easy.
Yeah, and I'll add real quick, John, and you know this, but for everyone else. So the follow-up from when I first wrote First Steps in 2013 to now 2023, the biggest change that we've seen is how social media has become a huge part of our lives, whether we're talking LinkedIn for business, whether we're talking Instagram or Facebook for personal stuff, whether we're talking Tinder, Blender, whatever the dating websites are. I did a count, and there's over 132 different social media sites. And what's interesting is digital assets are the Wild West of assets, right? So every state, county has a probate policy, right? And you know how you probate real estate or a vehicle or investments. But digital assets were not contemplated when the majority of the probate laws were created. And so what's happened is, I'll give you an example. Yahoo Mail will never give you access to your deceased loved one's emails. Period. End of quote.
Wow.
Gmail, if you jump through 22 different hoops and turn around and the moon is aligned like this, you can get access. And so as a result, dismantling or even just consolidating someone's digital footprint is really challenging. Facebook will allow you to memorialize a page. Other platforms will not. And so the next solution that's coming out from First Steps, hopefully in the spring of next year, will be what do I do with all these different digital assets? How do I either shut them down or, memorialize them? And what rights do I have as a decedent to taking my daughter's picture off of a dating website? Because if you read the fine print on those dating websites, they own the picture and they can use that to market their website. So that's kind of the next horizon. I think we have a couple of questions.
We
Bill?
do. Yeah.
Go ahead, Bill. Why don't you ask if you're good?
Yeah, absolutely. So we do have a couple of great questions here. The first from Chris is just asking if the book is available on Kindle or is it only a paperback workbook right now?
It's only on paperback right now.
Okay, excellent. And I have I kind of want to shift gears just a little bit here too, Shane, because I saw something on your website that really expanded my perspective on this, and I hadn't even considered it, is the identity theft for the deceased. And can you talk a little bit about that? I'd never even considered it.
Sure. Yeah. So one of the things I talk about in depth in the book is if you're publishing an obituary, and I don't know how many people still take the newspaper, I don't anymore, but when I hear about that someone has passed away, I typically go to legacy.com or I go to the funeral home website, and that's where obituaries are published today. One of the things I recommend is, first of all, nobody cares what exact day, grandma was born, but you can say 1932, but not January 20th, 1932, because right there you give a birth date. Okay. If you say that she died May 24th, 2023, then you've given an identity theft or thief kind of boundaries for when that person lived, right? And then if you say, and grandma was survived by her loving dog Fido, well, what's one of the most common password recovery questions? What's your dog's name, right? Fido. And so because a lot of password recovery questions have to do with things that are very personal to us, like one of mine is, what elementary school did you attend? Amadon Elementary in Washington, D.C., right? If you put that in the obituary, pretty soon you have enough clues for a thief to be able to, basically build a profile and steal an identity. And so I recommend in there that you keep obituaries very generic as it relates to personal questions and personal data. It is one of the fastest growing forms of identity theft out there is, people just cruising legacy.com looking for, names that they can steal and getting a new social security number or taking that social security number. So it is a real and present problem that we all need to be thinking about.
See, that just blew my mind, not even thinking about it, but it just really, again, I'm going to go back to synchronicity, Shane. Whenever you were having the technology problems, there's just so much synchronicity around you, the situation, the people who came into your lives to help you get through this. But then this interaction and this connection with John and My Life and Wishes too, it just seems really well connected as far as that goes. They just fit so perfectly. It's almost like the perfect marriage kind of thing. But that leads me to one of the other questions that we have from the chat as well, John, is when it comes to your platform, My Life and Wishes, can you describe what it is exactly and why somebody would need a estate planning attorney, or do they need an estate planning attorney as well?
Yeah, well, my short answer to that is you really need both. So what an estate planning attorney is going to do for you is create a plan. It's going to be a will or it's going to be a trust. Without either of those things, whatever you desire to happen to all your things or your stuff, the state is going to do. And it's going to take time and it's going to go through probate. with that. If you have a trust, you can avoid the probate, but it's important to even just have a will to let people know what your wishes are. Because if you don't have those, you're going to have fights, and it's going to take a long, long time for family to sort it out. Now, the thing about a trust or an estate plan or a will, those things really just designate your wishes. They don't provide a lot of the insight to family. I mean, when my father-in-law died, first question was, does he have a will? Where the hell is it? How are we going to find it? Where does he bank? How do I find the bank accounts? Where are his retirement assets? What are all his online identities? And how do we turn those off? And then what are the passwords? And moreover, what are the challenge questions? Because who knew his best friend in high school's name was Cliff? Because that took us a while to figure out when trying to access some of his accounts. So what the My Life and Wishes platform does, it gives you a place to store those critical documents, such as the trust or the will and those kind of things, as well as copies of life insurance policies so that family can find them, or at least the name of the company you're insured through, all your digital identities and things that family will need to know. So it's essentially a roadmap for family answering all the questions that we are in fact going to have after they're gone. As it relates to the digital identities, because there's another awesome question in here from Lakita, and my deepest sympathies on the passing of your boyfriend. Here's the challenge with Facebook. So Facebook has a section in it, if you can find it, where you can name a legacy contact. But you got to go to settings and drop down here and do this and do that. And, now you can add someone as your legacy contact. That gives that person permission after you're gone to either delete or memorialize your account. The problem is twofold. One is if I name a legacy contact in my account, a couple years later, if I die, that person has to remember that they're my legacy contact. Step two is they're still going to have to gather the appropriate documentation for Facebook, such as death certificate, and prove that you are a next of kin or someone that is legally allowed to turn the account off or memorialize. In the scenario, and that can take a long time. I've had people tell me it's taken them as much as 6 to 8 months to get that done. In the case of a boyfriend, I'm not certain whether, even if named as a legacy contact or not, if they would release the account. But I would certainly try. Get the appropriate documentation and submit it. My simple solution is, and what I do in my Life and Wishes platform, and I really don't care about Facebook's terms and conditions or the terms and conditions of any other digital platform out there. In my account, I have my Facebook, my login, my challenge questions, and I tell my family exactly what to do with it. Memorialize the account or delete it, your choice. But I don't want my kids getting a reminder message each and every year to wish dad a happy birthday after I'm dead. And I get those on LinkedIn and everywhere else. So the easiest thing to do is, if you have all this stuff logged in a secure place, is to make sure family know it. And then once I'm gone, they can immediately, my family, I mean, if I don't make it home tonight, my daughter in Florida could go into my Life and Wishes account. She can go to my Facebook. She can log in. She can turn off the area so people cannot comment in there. And she can put a memorialization in there. I'm sorry to inform you, dad passed away today. So at least people don't say, hey, Braddock, haven't heard from you for a while. What the hell are you up to?
Have you done that for LinkedIn as well, John? Or
Absolutely.
is that available on LinkedIn?
Yes, LinkedIn has a legacy contact too. Most of the platforms have that ability somewhere. Apple is working on one right now, but you know, I'm an old guy and I still have 24,000 photos up in iCloud.
Yeah.
And if you read their terms and conditions, there is no survivor rights in there now, unless you go through all the process. So I prefer to give my family access. Here's my Apple ID, here's my password. Go in there and get what you need, or, you know, because most of the time, if you don't have too much, I mean, it doesn't cost you anything in there. You're not buying anything anymore. It's just stored in the cloud, right?
Yeah.
Family they can go in and change the email or the login account to it and keep it for themselves. I mean, I don't know. Yeah, I've got over 500 movies up there as well. I don't know how much money I've spent through the years, but it's a lot. And can you imagine if you can't at least pass that on to your family?
Right. Well,
Yeah.
I'm aware of our time, and I teased at the beginning that I had a suggestion for all the notaries on the call. So the bank that I'm with is Triumph Bank out of Dallas, and our correspondent bank, who we can sell collateral to on an overnight basis or monthly basis, is the Federal Home Loan Bank of Dallas. And the Federal Home Loan Bank of Dallas is not compliant with e-signatures. And so why that's important is I was actually in Dallas 2 weeks ago. I was closing a $9.4 million deal. And I was with my client, and the closing was in Phoenix, but we were in Dallas from Denver. And we actually had to find a title company that would take us unannounced, that had a notary that would be able to notarize the deed of trust and a couple of other documents, some security documents, because the Federal Home Loan Bank does not take e-sign. And so again, thinking about ways to create business for notaries that is not market dependent on people just driving business to you from mortgage companies or banks, but seek out those banks that are selling to the Federal Home Loan Bank, where they have to have physical collateral. And there's probably a lot of business for you there because they have to have it notarized, and it has to be in person. So
Yeah, it has to be a wet signature. So that's good to know.
Yep.
Yeah,
Look
thanks,
at that.
Shane.
Business opportunities.
I like that. Thanks for weaving in the notary opportunity there a little bit for us too. And thank you for your time today. And we have about just a couple more minutes, but just in all of your years of experience in doing this and coaching people through some of the worst times of their lives and helping to prepare for it, what is some parting advice you'd have for our audience today?
So two things. One, with My Life and Wishes, John didn't really get into it, but it does have some great layers of security to make sure that your data can't be compromised, and also that whoever you give a designation to can't access the data without you knowing about it. Of course, if you're gone, it doesn't matter. But really taking the time to build out that information on his platform. And then secondarily, I joke that I wrote the book that everybody needs that nobody wants to read. But if you don't want to read my book, which I get because it's not something you take to the beach, get a copy of it and put it with wherever you have your important documents, because the basic tenets of the book will never change, right? Maybe some of the rules and the laws change, but in terms of a roadmap, I mean, I lay out a roadmap for these are the things that you have to do or you will have to do. And giving that as a gift to those that are kind of left to kind of pick up the pieces when you pass away, or if you have an aging parent, maybe it's something that you need to sit down with them and talk about. The last thing I'll leave you with is, I've got 3 adult children now. John's kids are all grown. One of the most painful calls I can be on is when, and it just happened with a family here in my town. Their son was in Texas. He was in the Army, killed in a car accident. He was 25, and they had no more right to his bank account or anything else than any other person on the street. And so if you have adult children, what I've done with my kids is I'm on their vehicle titles, I'm on their bank accounts, I'm on their investment accounts. I don't look at their bank account. I don't look at their investments. That's their business, but I'm purely there. And my wife is on all of those as well. Purely there in case the unthinkable happens. And you get that call, that you won't be hamstrung, not being able to take care of business for your adult kid.
Absolutely. And, and even a POA, you talk about estate planning attorneys and why we might need one. It's like some of our attorneys who have been on have said, even though they're still your children, they're adults.
Yeah.
And God forbid something happens to one of them, without the appropriate HIPAA paperwork and POA and those kind of things in place, it's going to be hard to get information. So I think it's really critical.
To answer the question in the chat, POA expires upon death. And so you can have a durable medical power of attorney that says, I agree that if I'm on life support for 10 days, I want to be let off. But a POA on a bank account or a POA in general that would cover bank or investment accounts or anything like that is voided at death.
And so I'd like to just add about your book and your course. One thing about it is in the book, I don't know if you can see it, it's really good. I have both the book and the course because, I love things that come in PDF, but the problem is they're not all bound together. I have to staple it. They get dog-eared and stuff. And so I like the book. The course is amazing. And if anyone buys the course, the thing about it is now you have access to it forever. So it's really helpful for you if you need it, situation. I think it's eye-opening, even if you're not using it right now, because it's a very insightful tool. But then in your My Life and Wishes account, under the documents and accounts, under website logins, much like we would do with our Facebook thing, you'll log it in as First Steps Help. You'll put the URL in, you'll put your username, your password, and in the instructions, lock your caps on your keyboard, folks, and put family. Watch this first. It's going to be amazingly helpful for you.
Great
Thank you.
suggestion.
Yeah.
Yeah, Shane, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for spending your wife's birthday celebration evening with us. We're gonna let you go so you can enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you again for that. This has been a delightful conversation and inspiring. And thank you for sharing it. I've already got a few messages privately about the power of this. So thank you for sharing your time. And John, thank you for sharing your friend and your colleague with us. I really appreciate it.
Thank you guys for having me.
All right, guys. Thank you so much for joining us for Legacy and Libations. We're talking about life, death, and the beverages that get us through it. Have a great week. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.